This is a tech follow-up to the 29 versus 27.5 video I did recently on GMBN to get into the facts and figures, but also answer some of your questions. The first thing that a lot of you pointed out is that I got the weights wrong. Of course I did. I said 50 gram difference. In fact, it's 500 grams, so you definitely would have felt that on the trail. Rich Piana is one of those people. Actually, almost everyone who watched the video noticed I got those numbers wrong, so apologies for that. Yeah, definitely 500 grams, you will feel the difference. And of course it's rotating mass. So let's talk about that straight away. When we're talking about the whole mass of a bike and the rider, in fact, you've got the rider, you've got the bike, and rotating mass, so the wheels, once they're spinning, it's said to make only 2% difference to the actual accelerating and decelerating of a bike. So it's not a huge amount, but 500 grams is a reasonable amount. But also, rotating mass does depend on the diameter of the wheel. So 29er is obviously bigger than 27.5 and it's heavier, so it is going to make a bit of a difference. And I do think it makes a difference to the feel of the bike. The smaller wheels that are lighter do make the bike feel more nimble. So for both different wheels, the 29 and 27.5, I ran the same model of wheels. They are the DT Swiss M1825 spline. They're an alloy rim. They've got a 30mm internal width on both sizes, so that doesn't affect the profile of the tyre. I ran tubeless on both sets of wheels. There were a few questions about why I ran the Barons on the smaller wheels and the Kaisers on the bigger wheels. Basically, I went with what I thought would be the best set of tyres for those conditions. So Kaisers are super grippy, great for enduro style riding, and Barons are also, but you can't get a Kaiser in a 27.5 at the moment, on the bigger 2.6 I must say in the plus. So that's why I went for the Baron on the smaller wheel. It's a really good tyre for those conditions. So I just wanted to go for what I thought was going to be the fastest. That's something I want to address slightly as well in that video. I know we have done a 29 versus 27.5 before, but I felt this was different because it's just one bike that can run two sets of wheels. And for me, it wasn't all about what was the fastest. It was about what would I choose if that bike was mine. Would I have two sets of wheels? Of course, that is the more expensive option, buying two sets of wheels. Or would I decide that one really suited me a little bit better, which I'll come to at the end of this video. Let's talk about the geometry changes when you change out the wheels. So it slackens off by 0.6 degree when you put the bigger wheels on, so the head angle does come out. But that for me is not enough to make a difference to the bike. I really don't feel that. If you let your rear tyre down or run more sag on the smaller wheels, I think it'll probably make just about the same amount of difference. The BB drop is something I think you do feel. So BB drop is the measurement when you compare the axles of the wheels to where the BB sits. On the bigger wheels, the BB sits lower, so in relation to those axles. Obviously your weight goes through the pedals and that feels like you can drive the bike better over obstacles. And I do think that does make a big difference. But also, I've got some props to show. If you couple that with the angle of attack, so when your wheel rolls over a bump, obviously a bigger wheel will roll over that a little bit easier. If you've got a smaller wheel, it's going to get more hung up on that bump. So when you've got that and the difference in the BB drop, that's where you do feel that the 29 are just sort of monster trucks over those smaller bumps a little bit better. I think that's where we saw the difference in the times at the bottom of the track. There's a lot of braking bumps, it's quite rough. The bigger wheels will just, you won't get as much feedback to your body, but also the tyres will roll over that little bit easier. Let's put the times aside for a second and let's talk about how the bike actually feels with the different size wheels. Well, the 29er feels fast everywhere, even climbing. It feels really compliant. You don't feel the bumps, you know, when you're riding down the hill, but also when you're going up through the saddle, it feels like a really smooth ride and it feels fast. But it doesn't feel as agile as the smaller wheels. I talked about it in the video a little bit where I do drag my rear tyre on my bum. I do that quite a lot on 29ers. Also just throwing the bike around. So in corners, I do feel like the smaller wheels are just that much more aggressive. Also, it sounds stupid, but getting it on and off the bike, I sometimes swing my leg over. On the bigger wheels, I'll catch it and almost fall over. Smaller wheels do feel like a much more old school normal mountain bike to me, whereas bigger wheels does feel like a sort of traily, fast cross-country bike. Although everyone has proved, racers have proved that they work for enduro, they work for downhill, of course, we saw that last year. Certain courses, I think they're going to feel good and they will be fast. Let's have a look at what you guys have been saying. Well, we had a poll on Instagram to see how you would choose, and we've got 8,625 votes for the smaller wheels, 27.5. But for 29, we've got 5,144. So, you pretty big margin going for the smaller wheels. And I would say that's probably what we see on the trails, especially in the UK. If you're looking at what people are riding, much more people are riding 27.5, although let's talk about 26, because a lot of people were starting that in the comments section. We don't talk so much about 26-inch wheels now, generally because not many manufacturers are making those bikes anymore. I guess you can still buy free ride, some downhill bikes maybe not even downhill bikes actually, but sort of dirt jump bikes and kids bikes all still come with 26-inch wheels. But when we're talking about your higher end bikes, they're all coming 27.5. So I think really that has become the norm in, let's say, the last 5-6 years, I would say. But yeah, there's a lot of people kicking off in the comment section. Will Mockle said it. It's funny how the vid is about 27.5 versus 29, but the whole comment section is people defending 26, which is fine. A lot of people saying 26 for life. Pericon Atakeus says, really? Wheel size debate? Is that all you've got? I know this has been raging on for years and years, hasn't it, since 29s came around, but I still think it's a valid point. There's still a lot of people trying to decide which one suits them best. I think I still am, to be honest. There's some situations where I really do like the 29ers, others when I want to get rid of them and chuck my smaller wheels back on. Just a couple more comments on the wheel size debate. The Chosen Dude says that it ended years ago when cross-country and enduro races began widely using and winning on them. No one cares about downhillers' opinions. They were always the last and loudest to adopt new technology, clipless pedals, carbon frames, tubeless, air shocks, 27.5 wheels, etc. I do kind of agree with that last statement. Downhillers are always pretty stuck in the mud. They do take a little while to get used to them, but it'll soon come, like we saw, with Greg Minnaar grabbing the bigger wheels and starting to do really well on them. The rest of the Santa Cruz team, everyone else joined suit after that and bigger wheels started appearing everywhere. But I would say that Nino Schurter, up until a couple of years ago, always ran 27.5 wheels. So he was the one person in cross country that really didn't want to use the bigger wheels. And obviously he's won a lot of races. I know he uses the bigger wheels now, but I don't think that statement stands completely true. One last one, this is from some judo guy. Is there still a debate about wheel size? Choose your ride and go and have some fun. It's all down to your preference. 29 just feels too big for me, but for some it's perfect. And that brings up a little bit of a point. A lot of people say that 29ers just suit bigger riders and the 27.5 are better for shorter riders. It's something that I really do want to test. I don't know if that's been completely proven. I know there are some shorter riders, people like Tracy Mosley, Danny Hart have used 29ers to a good amount of success. So I really want to test that out, get a smaller rider, put them on bigger wheels. Is it going to limit them at all? Who knows? We need to try that one out. A few people have asked this question, but Jogbird asked it. How about a mix-up, a 29er on the front and 27.5 on the back? That's something we're seeing come in with e-bikes. I've seen quite a few people running that. I've not tried it yet. I definitely would like to run it, see if it works. Obviously, you're going to run a wider tyre on the back with the 27.5 plus, and then a smaller one up front, the 2.4 and the 29er. Yeah, not tried it. I'm really interested to try that one out. Could it work? I don't know. It might be the best of both worlds. It might be the worst of the two together. Who knows? Neil Bloods raises a point. He says that it's always been 80% rider and 20% bike. The small margins are just that, small. Yes, it's definitely more the rider than it is a bike, but I would say it's probably more than that. I would say it's more like 90-95% the rider. Because if you put a really good rider on anything, 26-inch fully rigid bike, they're still going to be fast. But if we're talking about racing where hundreds of seconds, especially in downhill and enduro, make a difference between winning and coming second, then small margins are important. But of course, we're not all racers. We don't always have to have the fastest equipment on our bikes. Maybe it is down to preference. And then Bob Frucco brings up that again. He says, hi there. Actually, a question to Neil. In this video, you focused on the time and the speed advantages of using different wheel sizes. But what are your impressions in the case of agility, maneuverability on steep and narrow technical sections, hairpins, etc.? I've talked about it a little bit already, but I would say hairpins, I don't really notice the difference between the wheel sizes. It does seem to me like you would notice that 29-inch wheels were harder to get around a tight turn, but I don't actually feel that. They do feel pretty sort of, I guess it's the grip more than anything. You do have really good grip on the bigger wheels, but that's not something I really notice. It's more about those times when I've got to move around on the bike, so soaking the bike up. I'll finish this video with the final question. If I had to choose one set of wheels, only one, which one would I have? Actually, it's a really difficult one. I find it really hard to decide, but if I could only have one, I would probably go with the 29ers. Just feels like a really fast bike, and according to my test, it was 1 second faster, so why not? I'll have that one. If you want to see some more videos, click up there for the original video, down there for how tyres are made. I think that's really interesting. That does make a difference, that rotating mass of the wheel. Hit the button to subscribe to GMBN Tech and give us a thumbs up if you like these nerdy videos.